As old as the hills is a good old saying, but which hills? Take this most admired city of Scotland, Edinburgh, the castle towering 500 feet above Prince's Street, and towering almost twice as high above that, Arthur's Seat, an easy walk from Holyrood Palace Gate. Look at the crags, rising dramatically above the old closes of the Royal Mile. From the town you can be up there in no time on an easy path, but the atmosphere is absolutely out of scale with its small size. You know, one of the stories I love about the early days of mountaineering is when an alpine guide came here called Emile Ray. And when he saw Arthur's Seat, he was asked how long he thought it would take to climb. He said 2.5 hours. He got a big surprise when he was up in 25 minutes. Well, the fathers of Scottish mountaineering said a very wise thing about Arthur's Seat. They said 1/2 crown is bigger than 1/2 sovereign, but it's not as good. And the hard fact that they made and were found out to be true since is that Arthur's Seat is probably worth 10 times most of the Scottish peaks because it's got absolutely everything. In fact, it's the most studied volcano in the world. Almost more has been discovered about this wee mountain than any other in Scotland. Indeed, the very beginning of geology was here when an Edinburgh geologist called James Hutton proved some facts about the Earth that nobody had ever thought about before. And I'm going away over to an exposure known as Hutton's exposure, where the foundation of structural geology was laid, and I'm hoping to meet a man who will tell me something about it.
Dave! Oh, hello there, Tom.
Oh, I was told I'd find you around here.
Come on down, I'll show you something, Tom.
Hey, thanks. That's a very good wee bit. This is the Salisbury Crags, and I reckon this is where Scottish mountaineering began. Because in the early days when the Scottish Mountaineering Club was formed, the climbers used to come here, and I imagine it was they who brought over this alpine guide. He thought the mountain was thousands of feet high. Of course, far from that being the case, Arthur's Seat's only 823 feet high, although it's got every characteristic of a real mountain. It's not surprising that that guide was taken in. But the mountain feeling is here. So unusual. A few minutes from Prince's Street, over the High Street, down to Holyrood, and you're here. Hi, Dave. Well, it's good to see you.
How are you today?
Hello, fine. Well, is this a section?
This is Hutton's section.
I think I called it the exposure.
You did. It's actually Hutton's section, Tom. It was first described by James Hutton, one of the founders of geology. You know, Tom, when 200 years ago, geologists thought that these rocks were laid down at the bottom of a sea by quiet precipitation. But when Hutton came along, he realized that these were molten rocks at 1,000 degrees centigrade and forced between the sedimentary rocks. Look, if you come down here, you can see the way this tongue of rock has forced its way in between the layers of strata here and almost broken this bit off.
Aye, I can see it there. And originally this was the bottom of the sea itself.
That was the bottom of the sea. And the rocks underneath here are very hard. These started off as soft sands and soft muds, and they're now been baked by the heat of this rock and turned in the same way as you bake clay in a kiln to make china, been baked very hard.
So basically then, Arthur's Seat is the story of a volcano exposed. After all these years, it's been eroded away until you can see how a volcano actually works now.
You can see a section right through the centre of the Arthur's Seat volcano. Well, Tom, this is what I brought you to see here. We're actually standing inside the volcano of Arthur's Seat, inside the pipe. And here you can see the massive blocks being carried up the centre of the pipe inside the volcano. And you can imagine the force that carried these large blocks.
So these blocks are the things that weren't thrown out.
That's correct.
And all this was molten and it solidified inside the mass.
That is correct. And if you look down at the bottom there, Tom, you can see a fine example of the bubbles in the lava.
Oh yes, all these wrinkles.
That's correct.
I
You
see.
can see the bubbles. Some of them are filled with calcite and some are empty.
Uh-huh.
And if you come further up here, I was telling you that lava is a crystalline rock. And on this piece here, you can see the large crystals of feldspar, the large white crystals, tabular-shaped crystals up there.
I can see them glittering almost like silver. It took thousands of years, most probably, for Athos to grow out of the sea in eruption after eruption of hot lava. This is Mount Etna in full eruption, and it's incredible that James Hutton, the Edinburgh geologist, had seen that this is how Edinburgh was born. He realised before anybody else that this is how new land is made everywhere in the globe. The 7 hills of Edinburgh are volcanic craters. This is an artistic impression by the Geological Survey of how these Edinburgh craters looked before erosion had worn them down. The curve of the ribs from the perpendicular is due to a tilt of the landform.
Well, here we are, Tom.
Oh, terrific.
You don't have to go to the Giant's Causeway or Fingal's Cave in Stafford to see basalt columns. Edinburgh has its own fine example called Samson's Ribs.
Aye, almost like Greek pillars turning their side.
They are, yes. Do you know how these formed, Tom?
No.
Well, when this started off as molten rock, magma, deep down in the centre of the volcano. And when rock cools slowly, it shrinks. And when it shrinks, it cracks. And in the ideal condition, it forms these beautiful hexagonal pillars.
Aha. And they're all undercut, I see.
Yes, well, this is an example of the way in which the earth throws up mountains, and as soon as the mountains are up, they start being eroded down again by the weather. Here the ice gets into the cracks in the winter time and forces them out. And as you can see, these pillars up there are unsupported.
So they could fall down on top of us here.
I would think any time. We don't want to stay here too long, do we?
This is happening over there, in fact, round the corner, where the scaffolding is.
Yes, well, you see, it's so bad round there, Tom, that they've had to take remedial action and anchor some of these in to stop them falling on the passing motorists.
Right, well, I think maybe we should be getting out now.
Yes, before it falls.
Here, here. Okay, great.
It's a wee bit rough down here, Tom.
Aha. Well, I've got to watch this rock because I know basalt is always not too sound at any time. You really get a feeling of height when you're up in the ribs, and it's a surprise to see immediately below them an old railway tunnel and a disused line.